Okay, ready?
Yeah.
Okay, I'd like to welcome you all to our wonderful conversation of who would you be without your story. My name's Kim. I'm the facilitator, and I have some wonderful people here. I have Heidi, Alison, Roger, and Julie, and I'll introduce you to all of them in just a moment. My history is a relationship counselor, and I've been doing that for about 20 years. So in regards to who would you be without your story, I find that there's two different ways of coming at it for most people. It's either those that have been able to let go of their story and they want to talk about how they've achieved what they've achieved by letting go of their story. And there's those that are stuck in their story and it controls their life and dominates them. So today the conversation is open. So I'll introduce you to the people. I'll start with Heidi and we'll go from there. And what will happen is that each person will have a conversation. Okay. All right. Heidi, welcome. If you could tell our audience about who you are and yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I'm Heidi and I'm up in the United States outside of Washington, D.C. And I'm here because I love this conversation. When I'm working with clients and even friends and my poor partner, because he'll start telling me a story and it's like, well, is that a story or reality or what's behind it? And so for me, our stories are created from our perceptions of the world, our model of the world, and our history. And as you were saying, you can get stuck in that, or you can learn to detach from the story and know that you're actually an evolving being. So the story helps kind of define us. It helps me to explain what I do. It helps me to explain, a lot of things in the world, yet we're so much more than our stories. And I actually have a process I like to do where it's, what are you without that story? And that's what I love what this is, what's under that? What's under that? So then you start getting to the true essence of who your being is. And so that's why I'm here. I love this. Oh, I think you're muted, Kim.
Thank you. You can see I'm a real professional at this stuff. Okay, Alison, if you could introduce yourself and your reason for being here.
I was going to say, and Kim, that's just a story you're telling yourself about not being a professional. Sorry, I couldn't resist. So hi, folks. My name's Alison Williams, and I'm an empowerment strategist and self-love advocate. And pretty much I'm a transformation coach, and I do a lot of different genres of coaching, including relationship coaching and leadership coaching, and so that it goes. But the reason I really am all about empowerment and self-love is I believe that, when you feel good about yourself, then how you show up makes a difference. And empowerment is about choice. Self-love is also about, self-acceptance and self-approval. And so together, the empowerment and the self-love really helps for me, make a really impactful way of going through life. And that's why this topic is really, resonates with me too, because as a coach, as you said, Kim, there are two ways of looking at the story. You're either stuck in your story, and I would say people who are stuck sometimes don't want to move forward, which, later on in the discussion, I'm happy to talk about that as well. Or your story is what inspires you and what has helped you to grow. And for me, I had, I think we all have stories of one kind or another, but definitely my story that I've chosen to inspire me, was something that I now like to use as a way to impact other people and connect with other people so they can have a meaningful life based on their story, being meaningful and inspiring rather than, dragging them down. And that's why I'm here. And thank you for the invitation.
No, thank you. Julie, hello. Tell us about
Kim.
yourself and why you're here.
Well, I am simply here because I am fascinated by the concept of our stories. I think that all of us bring such uniqueness to the world by where we have been. But the most important thing when we frame this conversation is that we do not have to be defined by the stories, that we can really overcome. However, I want people that are listening to really remember that, there's no regret to where you've been. There's only the lessons that we can carry and the person that you've become that allows you to then keep working to the story that you can then write for the future you. And that's why I'm here. I'm very passionate about this, and I love this conversation anytime that we have these insightful gatherings that Sophia puts together. So thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you for being here. And Roger, nice to meet you for the very first time. And just really interested in your interest in this topic and why you're here.
Well, Kim, thank you so much. And this is, we think things are happening accidentally because I'm filling in this because I just found out about this the other day. But I said, oh, it's perfect because, see, I would never own my story. And what I mean by that is that I know that every single person has a valuable story, but we go through it in different ways. And so because my life was so incredibly different and strange to me and weird, I wasn't grabbing onto it. And so now what I do is guide everyone to understand their life journey, their soul's purpose, why they're on the earth, and start to embody that, which is just a process that we all move through. And it's, but when are we going to do it? When are we going to understand and accept the brilliant life journey that we were given? And that's how I see it for everyone. No matter how it shows up, there's something in there that could cause us to evolve, and then we're going to help our world, because that's also what happens when we up level who we are. That's the energy that we begin to put in the world, and we all know that that's what the world needs now, which is why I'm doing this work.
What a wonderful, inspirational group of people that we have here today. I know that the very first time that I ever heard, or what started my journey about the story, was Byron Katie statement of who would you be without your story? And it just captured me. It was someone talking about it. They just used that sentence that they'd heard it somewhere. And it really just stopped me in my tracks of, wow, who could I be without my story? And then from there, the journey goes on about learning about the story and how it does and control your life and live in it, and becomes a prison unless we learn to get out of it. That's how I see it anyway. But I think you guys have a far more interesting story to tell than I do. So who'd like to start here? And just let's see how it goes. You can ask a question, put it out there, or just give some examples. Great. Alison, let's go for you.
So I would just like to put out there, because we're talking about stories and how, you said, Roger, at the start, that you can either be stuck in your story or you can be inspired and uplifted by your story. And that's part of your development and growth. And one of the things that I know, certainly as a coach, is what we call secondary gain, where people will hang on to something that doesn't, on the surface, look like it serves them, but underneath they have a reason for holding on to their story. And I just wanted to get that out at the start. So I'd love to hear what other people have to say about that too. And a really good example that one of my trainers was telling us is that she's doing sort of healing of one kind or another. And she was, she'd talked to this woman who had some severe health limitations, and, trying to get this woman to get over her health limitations so she could be healthy. But it turned out that this woman actually didn't want to become fully well, because as she was ill, she had her husband looking after her and taking care of her and making her feel special and pampered. And I thought, oh my goodness, that is such a great example of secondary gain. So while on one hand you think, yeah, it's a no-brainer, you'd want to be fully well, but there are some people who hang on to their story, not because they can't get past it. There are those people who can't get past it. There are those people who don't want to get past it, like this example. And that's why I thought I'd just like to put that out there, to start off with, to see what other people have to say, as well as any other conversation and discussion we might have.
Great. Thank you. Yes, Heidi.
I'd love to chime in on that one. There's two things. I love the secondary gain. That's such a huge part of things. And I do a lot of transformational coaching. I also do somatic practitioner work. And we had this one client, I was working with a colleague of mine, and the same thing. She had polio. And she, had crutches and things and couldn't walk without them. And after working with her for a while, she actually got up and walked across the room without her crutches, which I just found amazing and wonderful. However, at the other side, she sat down and she said, and she started crying. And her tears were, who am I without my polio? And she never walked without crutches again, as far as I know. The other side of this that what I want to add, because that secondary gain is so important, and that's true with some of our coping mechanisms. And I'll use myself as an example. I used to look in the mirror and say how ugly I was, could never see anything pretty about me. When I really examined that part of my being, that voice in my head, that child, I was raised in a very severely, my story, raised in a severely abusive environment. I've written a number of books about that and how I healed and how I thrive, regardless of that. I don't have to be that story. But that voice in my head was keeping me safe, because if I thought I was ugly, then my mother was simply agreeing with me. She wasn't being mean. So that's that other side. We have the stories that we tell other people, but we have our own stories in our head. And that's the fun part for me as a coach. And I guess that's terrible to say it's fun, because it is, somebody else's trauma. But I get so excited when we start breaking down the stories that we're telling ourselves in our head, which very often is very different from how we present to the world. I love working with young women, especially, and young men that are in their early 20s and their 30s, because they're starting to recognize these patterns. And if they can confront and work with them at that age, then, I was in my 50s before I started actually doing that work. And then you've got a whole bunch more years on top. So I think, thank you for bringing up the secondary gain, because that's also the stories that we tell ourselves in our own head. What are we gaining from those? And that's where, when we can flip them to that positive, future-oriented, what's coming next, rather than what have I done and how is that making my future? So thank you for bringing that, Allison.
Heidi, I'm loving the conversation, because I like you didn't start to do some of this work till in my 40s, but I think that really there's so much power in discovering and bringing awareness to what is it that I'm telling myself about who I am, about what I'm doing, about where I've been. And for many people, they go about their lives in this state of just accepting the white noise of life and living without the awareness. And when we do that, because, and by the way, I'm raising my hand here, there was so much shame involved with the story that it was so scary to look at it. And I hid from the potential of who I could be if I only embraced where I was coming from, but also acknowledging the seeds that had been planted, and really, again, deciding that I didn't want to have that secondary story as well was the other key component when it comes to how we define ourselves by our stories. So great conversation. I'm loving it.
Yeah. Roger.
Yes, I do have something. Okay, so talking about when we began all of this, I started doing automatic writing in 1988. Kept it hidden from everyone for 20 some years, because I didn't want to talk about it, because I was doing everything else. I was a business person. I was in all these other areas, but people started finding it, and I slowly started putting it out there. But I was still never going to go in this direction in my life. Then in 2020, I saw, oh, wait a minute, the world is changing now. And then I was told we would be moving through a restructuring in our world. I go, what? What's going to happen? Well, you're trying to make it better. And so you have something that could help everyone if you understand all the discord and everything that's happening in your world, you can choose something different. And they said, we gave you all this information in 2012. That's a whole nother conversation because I didn't know that I had written all of this stuff. And I said, go and look. And so I have this, and so we're talking about your story, and this is the message that I'll read, because they said, the more people can come to accept this, your world will start to become much, much better, because you all come in with different lives, different journeys you're supposed to live, but they all have meaning and purpose and value when you can own them and accept them. And this one message was, this was January 11th, 2012. Your story is unique and valuable. It is unique because no other soul shares precisely your story. It holds the utmost value for you. Your story is comprised of everything your past holds, including all that has occurred for you, happened to you, everything you have done, every person you have met, and every word you have spoken. All of it has been and always will be perfect. Your only job then is to seek to know the perfection of your story. Any aspect of your particular story that you attempt to ignore, dismiss, or judge will cause you to experience some difficulty because you are refusing to receive the information and wisdom that your story holds. That was the message. And that's the one that I've been working with and bring people to understanding that within themselves. We change the energy within them, and then we change the energy of our world.
Because it really comes down to reframing your story, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You know?
Yes.
Yeah. One of the saddest things that I find as a counselor is that people live in their story because they believe it to be true.
Mm-hmm.
And they believe because it's true for them that it must be true for everyone else. And they get really trapped into that. And it becomes terrifying for many to even the thought of letting go of their story. Who would I be without that? And it's amazing the reaction when you offer someone the possibility of letting go of their story, how they don't want to, how they want to refuse it, or how they want to hold on as their truth, the truth. Yet the greatest change in life is when you realize, I have found for myself, that when I finally realized that I'm just living a story. And because I created that story, I can create a better story. And the only other thing I'd like to add here is that there are stories we tell ourselves which serve us and serve us well and bring us joy and happiness. Those I like to hold on to. But there's also stories that really hurt us and pain us. And to recognize those and realize that it's just a story. I can let go of it. You know?
I'd like to chime in with something here because, again, you were bringing up, we have our own model of. I'm loving this discussion. This is so fun. Thank you, everybody, so much. I've been taking notes because everybody's saying such wonderful things. I'd like to examine what you're talking about, our model of the world, which is in very much our stories that are created from our past experiences. And the biggest thing that I learned many, many years ago was that I have a different model of the world than other people. So when I really realized that, especially I was still in corporate America at that point, it allowed me to enter into the other person's world, help me to understand where their stories were coming from, and how I can then work within their model of the world to communicate. Because if I'm only communicating from my story, my model of the world, then I'm missing so much of what another person has to say. And then the other thing with the model of the world, I'm now in my mid-60s, and it's interesting, what I've been examining lately was the model of the world I created for myself when I was 30 of what 65 is supposed to look like. And some things are very congruent. Some things are right on. I'm doing exactly what I want, but then there's other things that were the expectations and stories put on me by the outside world. My parents' story of what success is, my parents' story of what being a good parent, grandparent, what family's supposed to look like and things like that. So that's been really fun for me to examine with myself and also with clients about how we've created, we create that model of the world, that story of what I'm supposed to be like at this age. What should I have accomplished? What should it look like? So that's the two things, my own internal and then being able to enter somebody else's model of the world so I can communicate and learn so much more.
Yes, please, Alison.
You're right, Heidi. I'm really loving this conversation too. And I'm finding it really hard just to sit back and not kind of, say something because I'm such a chatterbox. But what I've also really loved about what you said about other people's model of the world is when you understand their model of the world, it makes it easier to understand them, and therefore there's less conflict, there's less judgment, there's less the relationship tends to be much better. And particularly if it's somebody that you either have to be with, like a work colleague, or somebody you choose to be with, like maybe your partner, or sometimes maybe your in-laws, your mother-in-law, for example, the poor old mother-in-law stereotype who gets the hammering every time. But when you understand that they are a product of their generation, of their family, of their culture, of their religion, of their whatever, then it's so much easier to be understanding and compassionate. So thank you for opening that up. And that also connects to something else that you said earlier, that, your lady with the polio. So when our story is our identity, and therefore we're not letting it go, not willing to let it go, and Kim was also touching on this, that's when it kind of becomes an impediment, almost a wall that we can't get over because we are choosing not to get over it. So part of rewriting your story is changing your identity to match up with the identity you want. Like, what did I think 60 was going to look like? I remember my mother, when she was 60, telling me she had middle-aged spread, and I was about 20 in those days. I thought, middle-aged, are you kidding, Mum? But then the closer I got to 60, as I'm now 63, I thought, you know what? There was something that being 60 being middle-aged spread. So it is all about our perceptions and how we want to rewrite our story to make it powerful, not just for ourselves, but for people in our world and maybe the world at large.
One of the things, Allison and Heidi, when you're both speaking about this, what other people teach us that our story should be, I think that for me personally, and I'm starting to see this a lot with my clients as well, and by the way, just for context, I did not marry right when people told me that I should be married, right? Because that was the story that they had been told and they believed that's right for me. And once I married my first husband, I didn't have children, and now I don't have children. And for the majority of my adult life, what do you mean you don't want children? And I remember just really experiencing that inability to fit in to somebody else's box or the script that they had for me. And what I found is that it was a lonely road to not allow myself to fit in. And I knew there are certain things that I wanted for my life that I wanted to look different. And this is a lot of what we have to be willing to do, is when somebody else's story doesn't fit you, you need to be able to be willing to be lonely. You need to be able to be willing to stand for what you deeply know that it's you. And I think that there's a lot of suffering in people when they take on the script or the story, or they wear the coats that other people have woven for them. And by the way, there's times in which I have defined myself by those other scripts, and the discomfort of that is much greater than this discomfort of being lonely and standing out, because I'm standing out with the own story that I'm creating for myself. So that's what I want to encourage whoever watches this, is that choose your discomfort. But the best discomfort is the one that grows you, the one that you yourself can weave for yourself. So I want to encourage that from the listeners as well.
For years, I attended a group called the School of Philosophy. And the reason for bringing that up is that they have a statement. And the statement is that if ever you're faced with a decision and it's an easy choice or a difficult choice, always take the difficult choice, because that's the one where you really grow. Whereas the easy choice, it just keeps you stuck where you are, you know.
I'll say something else. And then when you become willing to know, own, and tell your story, wow, does your life change? Because that's what happened for me, because I held it back for so long. And because it was different, it was weird. And when I'm talking about what's happening in our world, and I knew this, and I'm a mystic, and that was really uncomfortable for me to do. But I decided to do an interview because I knew I had to break out of that box, you know, that comfort zone. So I did an interview on this YouTube channel called Next Level Soul. And I had done it back in April 5th of this year. I did the interview there, but it was only released on Sunday, this past Sunday. And everyone wanted to hear that story. That video now has 81,000 views in 4 days. And I've been inundated with people contacting me and talking about it. And this was something that I was hiding, that I was not willing to talk about. And now my life has just completely changed as a result of that. And this is the importance of owning our understanding our individual story and that it's valuable. The other thing too that I was given as we're moving through this time in our world, I was given a message that said, you were right and so are they. I go, what does that mean? It means that we all come in with different ideologies. We come in different beliefs. We come in with different ancestry, DNA. And that's what we have to come to understand. Everybody's doing the same thing. How do we come to consensus? How do we come to love and harmony and peace through all of that? And that's what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
I love that. That's so perfect. The you are right and so are they. And that's the thing about getting into other people's models of the world. You can fully understand that there is a difference. And one other thing I wanted to say, it's something that I use a lot, is you're uncomfortable in the problem and the story. Why not be uncomfortable in the solution and the future? And so, yeah, it's that comfort thing. It's like we're designed for comfort. We want comfort. We want to be in that comfort place. Yet we're also designed to grow, which means we need to break out of that comfort zone. So I always find it's the paradox. I think that's the other thing about stories, is being able to hold the paradox of, even in your own stories, you know, the paradox in your own head around a lot of those things. I think paradox has a lot to do with our stories and understanding others.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the favorite questions I ask myself often with any thoughts that come up with that I choose to question is it true? That simple statement, is it true? And just sitting with that, because I find that, I'll speak more for myself, I've found that I used to believe everything I thought was true, and it was real, and I was stuck, and there was nothing I could do to change it. And it wasn't until a moment of significance, which happened 2 years after suffering from a major car accident, that all of a sudden a realization came to me that I've been doing this to myself. It wasn't them, wasn't my parents, wasn't the teachers. I bought all the stories. I took it all on. I believed it to be true. And then I started living in that life. And so for me to have that question, simple question, when a thought comes into my head, which doesn't bring joy, is it true? And I found that to be life-changing for me. Do you guys have something like that you use to remind yourself that it is a story and that it's not true?
Kim, I use that same statement as well. Is this story true that I'm telling myself? And I think that that is, or throughout the day, as maybe the different kind of emotions kind of rise up, I go back and I stop and I force myself to look, what am I telling myself? Is this story true? And I think that, our brain is going to tell us it is. And I love it. And by the way, if people listening again, if you have not read it, please do so. It's one of these books that really created a big shift for me, and that is the Four Agreements, because I think that when we're not when we're making assumptions, not only about ourselves, but about others, that, oh, there you go. I just moved mine upstairs. But yeah, this is what happens. We create that immense pain for ourselves, and therefore our actions are going to have a ripple effect to the people around us as well, not only to ourselves.
I love that what you said, Julie. I'm going to tell you something else. I have this writing that I do automatic writing, and I wrote this in the 1980s, and it took me forever to kind of figure out what I received. And it said, your emotions are not an end of themselves. They are designed to lead you to your beliefs. Your beliefs may or may not be based on truth. And so when we can get into am I supposed to be upset? Is this thing supposed to make me sad and uncomfortable? Maybe I'm having a different idea about what's going on here. And that's a process that we move. But I tell you, I looked at that thing. Somebody did a calligraphy of those words after I had written it, and it's hanging on my wall. It still took me forever to kind of understand exactly what it was saying. But yeah, that's what we're doing. So
I'd love a copy of those words, Roger.
oh, great. Yes.
That's awesome. Because following on from Julie, what I was going to say, and also with Kim, is it true? Even if it's true, what do I choose it to be? It's true, but do I choose to hang on to what's true, or do I choose to make what's true something better? Now, obviously, there's the other side of that is maybe it's not true, and I'm just thinking it's true, getting to Heidi's, your map of the world. But regardless of whether it's sort of my map of the world or whether it actually happened, what am I choosing to do with that experience? And that, I think, is part of what we've all been talking about in one way or the other. It's really about, having our story build us up, getting outside our comfort zone so we can be better as a result of our story. So you can choose to be like, who am I without, without my story? So if your story, is an evolutionary one where you've become bigger and better and you've grown as a result of it. Now, who would you be if you didn't have that experience? And still, do I want to be that small person, or do I want to be this person who's, come out sort of with lots of bumps and bruises, but a better person as a result? So yeah, just thought I'd throw that in the mix.
To that, what comes into my mind is, if all I'm living in is a story, then what story do I choose to live in?
Yeah.
And, so what meaning do I choose to add to any situation? So once the recognition that I am the creator of my story, and in such I'm the creator of my world, then I'm empowered to no longer live as a victim in it, but to actually choose the path, to choose my path, and to choose the meaning I add. And if I'm adding a meaning that causes me suffering, then I will ask myself, is it true? And it's never true. It's only whatever meaning I've attached to it. So it's I found incredibly empowering to be able to pull myself up. Do I still drop into the hole sometimes? Yes, but it's very quick to pull myself up and say, hey, is this true? And if it's not true, then what do I want it to be? So your thoughts on that type of thing?
I'd like to add to what you just said. I give myself the 5-minute pity party. And it generally only lasts about a minute now, but I can remember when it lasted for days. And whether I thought the story was true or not, I was just going to hang in it and, totally destroy my body with all the chemicals, because that's the other side of this. Our stories and our beliefs and everything that goes on in our body is a chemical.
Hold on to that misery.
Yeah, so we get addicted to those because they make, when part of the reason that we don't let go of our stories is because they make us feel. Now, it may be that, at some point, I trained myself out of enjoying that pity party feel, that depression feel, that anger, that kind of stuff. And when that comes up, it doesn't feel that good anymore. What feels good is tending towards joy, contemplation, contentment, understanding the world. That's a big piece of it. And then one other thing that I wanted to bring up about, asking, is that true? Sometimes, so we're made of many different parts seem to live in our heads. There's our culture used to say we had to be a mono mind. We are not a mono mind. We have so many different wise beings and people in our heads, and we need to become allies with those. Sometimes, like, I have a judge in my head that will start telling me a story, and this happened recently. I was at a conference, and I don't normally sit in my head and judge people around me, but this judge was just going off and look at that person and look at this and all this stuff. And I finally said, stop. And it wasn't the question of, is this true or not? It was the question of, what are you trying to tell me? Because the judge only knew to get my attention. It can be one of the stronger sort of allies in my head. What it was trying to get me to do was pay attention to the fact that I'd gone into this conference. I'm a very strong empath. And I'd gone into this conference, and it was a lot of people that had pretty severe mental illness. And I was just energetically, because I've been an energy practitioner for over 40 years now. I started in the 70s, and I just was all of a sudden trying to help heal everybody in the room, which was draining me so much that I couldn't, I was getting to that point. And so the judge was coming in, and it's like, well, no, that's not true, but this is the only way I could get your attention. So sometimes, for me at least, when the stories in my head are coming up, it's because that's the only way a part of me knows how to get my attention, to pay attention to something else that's going on. And an acronym for pain is pay attention now. Pay attention inward now, PAIN. It's like, oh, many times the pain I'm feeling is something's going inside that I need to address that I'm not. And that's many times when those old stories, the judge comes out, the contrary part of me, those kinds of things, because I'm not paying attention. I've stepped out of that awareness for whatever reason. Again, it's not judging that I'm bad for not paying attention. It's just, I'm just not paying attention, and everybody's trying to get my attention inside me. They say, stop it.
So I love that, Heidi. I get that in your story, the judge was there trying to save you, which is really vital for your sanity and for your sort of emotional well-being. But I actually just want to, I can't see this. I just want to bring people's attention to this book called Positive Intelligence by Shazad Shamin. And he talks about the fact that we have saboteurs that sort of are there supposedly trying to save us, but in fact they are undermining who we are. And he talks about having the judge as our main saboteur, and he says there are three kinds of judges: the judge of self, the judge of others, and the judge of circumstance. And then there are 9 accomplice saboteurs, and that's a fabulous book, because he also talks about we have this judge persona within us, but there's also the sage that lives within us. And, we can develop our sage to counteract the judge. Doesn't mean to our saboteurs, doesn't mean our saboteurs will go away, but we can actually diminish them. And the reason I bring that up is because so much of our stories are based on our saboteurs who pretend to want to help us, but in fact, they're undermining us. So, he talks about saboteurs like the victim, the avoider, the hyperachiever. How many people, have this story that I've got to be busy or I'm really successful. But in the meantime, what's it doing to their health and their relationships and what have you? But if you read this book, that's just one of your saboteurs. So I cannot recommend this highly enough. So Julie is a positive intelligence coach. It's a beautiful, beautiful, book and experience. So I just thought I'd share that because it tended to sort of follow on from what you were saying, which is separate from your judge who was actually doing the right thing by you, Heidi.
Well, yeah, and that's what I wanted to put in. The book that you've read there and another book called No Bad Parts and another, what they taught me was to make those allies of mine.
Yeah.
So that when they do pop up, most of the time they're popping up because they're afraid you're going to do something that's not healthy for you.
Yeah.
In their model of the world.
Yeah.
Which is that old, when you're however old when that one was created. So the reason that I can see my judge that way is because of understanding exactly that book is great. And Julie, that's great that's what you use for your coaching. That's fabulous.
Yeah, I have to tell you that it's been transformative for me in the past year. And part of my story is I spent my life climbing that corporate ladder. And when I received a separation package at the beginning of the pandemic, all of a sudden, something that I had defined myself as had gone away. And it really started to bring up a lot of grief, a lot of past traumas that I never really knew were there. And for the past 3 years, as I've grown my practice and I knew that I wanted to become a coach. I'd gone through certifications, but the thing that has really grounded me is knowing that my judge was there to protect that little Julie. My judge and the other saboteurs that we've talked about were there to enable me to feel loved and safe when I needed it the most. And now doing this work with others, I have to recognize it in myself first before I can definitely decide that I can, open up and support others through the process as well, because it's been very important. And then it's transformative. And I think that this is what I encourage everyone to really be able to know, that don't judge the judge, but just notice him and notice him, why he's there. How did they get there? And what is it doing? Because that's just the default, right? That's just what you created. And it is possible to shift. The other thing that I use a lot with my clients is I'm a tiny habit certified coach. So the encouragement that I have for others is, don't go big. We don't change, and behavior cannot change if we're trying to rely on motivation and we're trying to shift from, this is what I've done all the time, and now I'm going to go to the gym January 1st and do a 1 hour. It's not going to happen. Give yourself some grace and know that incremental change happens, one, when you feel good. So don't beat yourself up for where you've been. But number two, say to yourself, what can I do better today that is a little bit, at least 1% different, and celebrate that, because then you will be able to start to make the strides toward what you want to be in rewriting your story if you're celebrating that.
I want to jump on Julie. That was just so great. I'm gonna piggyback on that a little bit too, because especially for people who are watching, who may hear this later, because you guys are also smart. You have all this incredible intelligence, but that's that can be the disguise sometimes, because intelligence has nothing to do with it. We still have to move through things. And so I received this message, I don't know how long ago, and it told me the irony of life. And said the biggest irony of life is that you're going through it trying to be everyone else, only to come to the end of your life to discover that you were just trying to become yourself. I go, oh, wow. Now, intellectually, I understood that. But getting there and doing it was another journey, because I had to move through all my human neural programming and all of that stuff to get there. So I just want people to understand it's a process that we all move through. And whatever modalities or whatever we use, to get there. But that was, I just had to throw that in because I was listening to these conversations and I'm thinking, if people are listening to this, they're hearing all these really intelligent people and they're going to think, well, maybe they can't do this. And that's never the case. Anybody can change and become that empowered person that they're meant to become. So thanks for that.
Totally, Roger. I think the only thing you need is the willingness to change, because without that, it doesn't matter how clever you are, how many books you've read, how many coaches you have. If you're not willing to make the change, if not, you're not willing to give up your story to create a new story, then it's not going to matter at all.
You'll never change.
Yeah.
We have a few more minutes before we start to wind up. It's amazing how fast the time can fly. Is there anything that any of you would really like to share that you haven't been able to say at this stage that you'd like to share with our audience?
Only just how amazing I think this group is, and I'm so proud and pleased to be part of it, and I've really enjoyed the conversation, so thank you.
I'll ditto that. And then I think this has been my bandwagon for a number of years now, is we have our stories, we have all of those things, but the biggest thing for me is to become your own best friend. When I became my own best friend, got the compassion, and I want to ditto what Roger says, please, if there's anybody out there that doesn't feel they've gotten to certain points, it's just where you are. I'm 65. The me of 20, the me of 30 is very different from the me of now, even the me of a year ago. It's that, and that's the one thing that I really want to encourage. It's like Allison was saying, if you have that willingness to change, to want to look at yourself, and even if everything is great in your life, I love that everything's great in your life. And what more can there be? It's always kind of that question of what more could I bring in? What more can I enjoy? And not from a success, have to get something done, have to do, is there, it's the question of, is there more? What more is there? I would encourage, this really learning the self-compassion, the self-love, the even when you're not loving yourself, learn to love yourself, because all those faces still pop in. If you'd seen me 2 days ago when some stuff kind of hit the fan with a nephew and things like that, I handle it so much better than I did 20 years ago because I have tools, but I'm still sometimes inside churning and churning and churning, but not necessarily throwing that out. So that's kind of one. And I do want to say thank you so much, everybody. This has been so great.
Can I just add to what you said, Heidi? And I know I've kind of said said something before, but what you said is that, even if you have enough or you have everything already, you can ask what else, what more. And what I want to add to that is that, we are all deserving, whether you have a lot, whether you've never had any, whether your story is one of lack, one of pain, one of hurt, you are entitled. It's our birthright to enjoy, to have abundance, to have enough. There's enough for everyone, to have lots of everything. So it doesn't matter how much you've got or how little you've got, you are entitled to have more. So please go and get it, go and claim it. It's our birthright. And I believe firmly, regardless of what your belief system is, if you do believe in a God or a universe or a being, that they are benevolent beings. They are a benevolent force that want the best for you. So please want that for yourself as well. I just really wanted to add that to you. So thank you for that, Heidi.
Yeah. What I'd like to do to start to wind today up is just go around the room, because to me it's like we're in a room and we're all sitting here, is to just ask, from today, what have you gained from today for you? And we'll start, if I can, with Roger.
That we have a movement going on in our world, and all of us are coming together to help that, because we are becoming aware of who we are and we're beginning to own that. And as we do that, then we're putting a different energy into our world because we've all seen things coming apart a little bit, but it's coming apart so that we can come together. And that's exactly what's happening with groups like this and all the other ones that are growing. And we just have to keep shining and doing that even more. And so everyone on the planet at this time has something within them that they can move into to offer that's going to help not only improve their lives, but improve our world. And that's the the message I want everyone to really kind of accept.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Roger. Julie, for you.
You know, I am again humbled. I think that there's never an accident in the world, I believe. And I love how these panels, I am not sure how it always works out, but we have some incredible people just coming together and really collaborating to get a message that I know that someone is going to listen to this and it's what they needed to hear. There is power in your story if you're listening. Your story does matter. And what I want you to know is that never get discouraged, never compare and despair. And when you're thinking, why is this happening again? The way that we grow is really like an onion in which we have to peel the layers. And you may think, I already learned this lesson, but you're learning it in a deeper way and you're becoming more of who you're meant to be. So never stifle sharing the journey with somebody else because the person that you're meeting needed to hear that part of your story, needed to hear where you've been so they can themselves feel like they have hope and they can grasp inspiration from and believe that it's possible for them as well. So we are just part of the puzzle and we're creating a ripple effect for one another. So I encourage everybody on that because that's something that, you know, being here, I continue to be reminded of. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Heidi, for you, what have you gained from, well, for you, it's nighttime, so tonight.
Well, I want to say I'm so grateful that you called on me after Julie, because one of I just finished writing a collaborative book called Stop the Silence, and it's about thriving after childhood sexual abuse. And we're sharing our stories of what happened and then a practice that we use to help us thrive. And the most important thing about that and bringing that sort of topic and bringing those stories out is shame stops us so often. Shame only lives in secrecy. So there is always somebody out there that can hear your story no matter how bad it is, so that you can be heard. We need to be heard. We need to witness. You also can't change your story until you have shared it, because you may not even know it's a story. So it's scary, you know, like Roger's saying, you know, I understand, I empathize with him, you know, coming out about my energy work. I mean, my family wanted to have me deprogrammed in my 20s because I was studying this yoga thing and this energy thing, and this was 1978, and God forbid you did that. You were, you know, so, but by finding people I could share my story with and could understand, I was able to not be in the shame that my family was trying to put on me. So our stories, and somebody can hear you and know they're not alone. Because we talk about that. I apologize. I think it was Allison that brought up about lonely. I'm not sure. And I remember when you said that, it feels so alone when nobody's heard your story. Because we're in a wonderful age where we're growing in consciousness so rapidly. And by sharing and opening, it makes such a difference in our world. So I want to thank everybody here for sharing everything they did. I've got 2 pages of notes. I am going to use what you guys said with my clients.
Good on you. And yes, to have voice is one of the most powerful gifts we can give ourselves, to speak our truth, you know, and not hide behind it all, you know. And Alison, for you, tonight for you, yes.
Thank you.
How's it been for you?
So I loved it. So, you know, what I've got from this is you can own your story or your story can own you. So please own your story. And I think as Roger and Julie and even everybody has said, this is now a time where, people are bringing their shame out into the light, because shame loves darkness and secrecy. So bringing out, what we think is shame, owning our story, allows other people to own their story. And now more than ever, we are of a generation, of a culture, of a global consciousness where we are not just willing to share our stories, we're willing to hear other people's stories, and we're willing to accept people regardless of their stories or because of their stories. So please own your story. Don't let your story own you. And that's just where that's my take. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. And for me, I just want to thank all of you, because there's been such amazing knowledge in this group, and we've only touched on it just a little bit. So an hour, I feel like this conversation needs to go on for days to really go into the depth and what we can really learn and gain from it. And so I just really appreciate all of you for being here and for touching the lives of each other and those out there, and for touching the lives of ourselves. So thank you for that. What I'm going to do now is pass you over to Sophia. And once again, just thank you so much for being a part of this panel discussion. Really appreciate it. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. And oh my God, it's been a wonderful, wonderful discussion. I've been sitting here in the background listening to it and picking up so many tips as well on, overcoming, to stepping out of our story that limits us into the one that empowers us. That is really incredible. So thank you. And thank you so much for Angel, who's been working in the background, putting everyone's links in. And for everyone who has been watching us, do click on those links. Talk to these wonderful people who have just shared an hour of their time, sharing their passion, for helping people to overcome their stories. Definitely want to know more. And also do click on the links for upcoming panel discussions. We've got so many that are coming up, all on various different topics on empowerment. And come and join us. Come and join in our community. Before we go, first of all, obviously I forgot to say, Heidi is one of our beautiful hosts in Sacred You. So Heidi, would you like to tell everyone just a little bit about your tribe?
Well, as I said before, my tribe is becoming your own best friend, because that's the bandwagon I'm on these days. Because once we learn to be our own best friend and treat ourselves the way we would a precious friend of ours, when everybody's doing that, it just makes such a difference in the environment. So we do a number of processes. We talk about what's going on. We talk about how to become friends and allies with those voices, some of the intelligence stuff and no bad parts. So I bring in a lot of that kind of stuff. Plus we pull some cards, oracle cards, and things
and
like
have some
that.
fun. And have some fun that you have with your best friend.
Yeah, because that's the whole
Absolutely.
point. Once we have fun with ourselves, then we automatically have fun with everybody else. And that's the world I want to create and live in.
Thank you. And it's so, and I thoroughly recommend joining your tribe, which is on tomorrow, I do believe, in about 22 hours, something like that.
It's 8 o'clock my time.
Okay.
I think that's like 10 o'clock your time or 11 o'clock in Australia.
10 a.m. our time on Saturday and 8 p.m. on Friday for you, something like that. So thank you for that. And our amazing facilitator, just got tongue twisted there, amazing facilitator, Kim, is also the host of a tribe. So tell us about your tribe, Kim.
You're muted. Kim, you're muted.
There we go. The power of inquiry. And what it is that we put up 3 different topics for the session. Whoever's there, we go through and ask which of the topics do we want to choose to discuss. And each of the topics are challenging. And what happens is that we just give our thoughts and opinions on it. And the whole basis of it is to go deeper into understanding the way that we think. So it could be a topic, something like nobody can hurt you except yourself emotionally. And that might be one of the topics. Another would be, who would you be without your story? That could be another one. But it's a group which meets once a fortnight on a Monday evening, AST 6 p.m. And yeah, we have a lot of fun. It's just about looking into self, the power of inquiry. It's there for you if you want to be a part of it. We're on next Monday night, by the way, so come along and join us. Have some fun.
The fun of having two computers right beside each other. A lot of feedback. And thank you for that. And so you can come and join us just for $1 Australian for 3, and you get 2 weeks to try out not just Kim's tribe, not just Heidi's tribe, but all of our other tribes. We've got about 26 other tribes, something like that, that you can try out just for that $1 Australian for 2 weeks. And then after that, it's just 15 Australian dollars a month to keep taking, to becoming your own best friend and to overcoming your story and to take so much benefit from all the tribes that we have. So thank you again. Thank you ever so much for this. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Alison. Thank you, Roger. And thank you, Heidi, for sharing your passion in our conversation today, our panel discussions. And I do hope to see you sometime very, very soon. And everyone else who is watching, come back again next week for our next panel discussion.